Strike one, strike two, strike confirmed. Right now, in the Persian Gulf, the world's most critical oil hub is under fire. Kharg Island, the nerve center of Iran's oil exports, the facility that handles nearly 90% of the country's crude shipments, has just been hit by what witnesses describe as multiple precision airstrikes. Smoke plumes rise over the terminal. Emergency crews rush to contain fires. And in Washington, a stark warning echoes from the highest office. Total wipeout is next. This is not a drill. This is not speculation. This is a developing crisis with the power to reshape global energy markets, redraw alliance lines, and push an already volatile region toward the brink. Welcome to Power Clash Report. We are breaking down one of the most significant military and economic developments of 2026. We are moving beyond the viral headlines to examine what actually happened at Kharg Island, what the strategic stakes really are, and what total wipeout could mean for Iran, for the United States, and for the world. We will analyze verified reports from regional sources, satellite imagery, energy market data, and official statements. We will assess the military logic behind targeting an oil hub, the economic ripple effects of disrupting global supply, and the human cost of escalation. And we will answer the question that matters most. Is this a calibrated demonstration of force or the opening move in a wider war? Stay with me until the end, because understanding this story is not just about geopolitics. It is about the price you pay at the pump, the stability of your investments, and the fragile mechanisms that keep conflict from consuming us all. Let us begin with the facts. Kharg Island is not just another oil facility. It is Iran's primary export terminal, located in the Persian Gulf approximately 48 kilometers off the Iranian coast. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration and industry reports, Kharg handles between 85 and 90% of Iran's crude oil exports, roughly 1.5 to 2 million barrels per day under normal conditions. The island features extensive storage tanks, loading jetties, pumping stations, and defensive infrastructure. It is a strategic choke point within a strategic choke point, the Persian Gulf itself, through which about 20% of the world's oil supply flows. On March 15, 2026, multiple regional news outlets and social media channels reported explosions and fires at Kharg Island. Footage showed thick black smoke rising from the terminal complex, with emergency vessels responding to the scene. Iranian state media confirmed an attack on the facility and described it as an act of economic terrorism. As of this recording, no official U.S. military command has publicly claimed responsibility for strikes on Kharg Island. However, statements from the White House and Pentagon in recent days have emphasized that all options remain on the table, and that Iran's capacity to project power and fund regional proxies will be degraded by any means necessary. Now, let us examine the claim that the United States conducted these strikes. If verified, this would represent a major escalation in targeting methodology. Previous U.S. and Israeli operations in Iran have focused on military infrastructure, missile production sites, air defense systems, command centers, and research facilities. Targeting an oil export terminal crosses a threshold into economic warfare, striking at the financial lifeline of a nation. The strategic logic is clear: degrade Iran's ability to fund its military, its proxy networks, and its domestic priorities by crippling its primary source of foreign revenue. But the risks are equally clear. Attacking critical energy infrastructure can trigger global market shocks, invite severe retaliation, and blur the lines between military and civilian targets under international law. Let us talk about the economics, because this is where the impact becomes personal. If Kharg Island's operations are significantly disrupted, even temporarily, the effects ripple outward immediately. Global oil markets are forward-looking. They price in risk before supply is actually cut. Brent crude prices could spike by $10, $15, or even $20 per barrel within hours of confirmed news. For consumers, this means higher gasoline prices, increased heating costs, and broader inflationary pressure. For businesses, it means higher transportation and manufacturing expenses, squeezing margins, and potentially triggering layoffs. For developing nations that rely on affordable energy imports, it means a heightened risk of social unrest and economic instability. This is how a strike on a remote island in the Persian Gulf can affect your wallet, your job, and your community thousands of miles away. Now, let us address the phrase that has sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. Total wipeout is next. This language, attributed to President Trump in recent briefings, is deliberately ambiguous and strategically potent. What does total wipeout mean? Does it refer to the destruction of Iran's oil infrastructure, the neutralization of its military capabilities, regime change? The ambiguity is the point. It keeps adversaries guessing, maximizes psychological pressure, and preserves flexibility for decision makers. However, such rhetoric also carries significant risks. It can corner an adversary into a response, escalate miscalculation, and undermine diplomatic off-ramps. In crisis diplomacy, words are weapons, and total wipeout is a verbal missile. Let us examine Iran's potential response. Tehran has repeatedly vowed retaliation for attacks on its territory. It possesses a range of asymmetric capabilities: ballistic missiles that can reach U.S. bases in the region, proxy networks that can target allies and interests globally, cyber units that can disrupt critical infrastructure, and the ability to threaten the Strait of Hormuz. If Iran perceives the Kharg Island strike as an existential threat to its economy, the incentive for a severe response increases. This could include missile barrages against U.S. facilities in Qatar, Bahrain, or the UAE, attacks on commercial shipping in the Gulf, cyber operations against financial or energy systems, or activation of proxy groups to strike U.S. interests elsewhere. The cycle of action and reaction could escalate rapidly, drawing in multiple actors and expanding the conflict geographically. But let us also consider restraint. Iran's leadership is strategic, not suicidal. It understands that a full-scale war with the United States would be devastating. It may choose calibrated responses that signal resolve without triggering all-out conflict, limited missile strikes on unpopulated areas, cyber operations that cause disruption but not destruction, or diplomatic maneuvers to rally international condemnation. The choice between escalation and restraint will depend on intelligence assessments, domestic political pressures, and the perceived willingness of the U.S. to absorb costs. This is the delicate dance of crisis management, where every move is calculated and every signal is scrutinized. Now, let us talk about the human dimension. Behind every strategic analysis are real people whose lives are shaped by conflict. On Kharg Island, workers face immediate danger from fires, explosions, and potential follow-on strikes. Their families worry. In Iranian communities dependent on oil revenue for public services, economic disruption means hardship. In the United States, families of service members deployed in the region live with heightened anxiety. And globally, consumers feel the pinch of rising energy costs. The human cost of escalation is not abstract. It is measured in livelihoods, in mental health, in the daily struggle to afford basics. At Power Clash Report, we commit to covering the strategy without losing sight of the stakes. We will verify before we amplify, and we will humanize before we politicize. There is also the information warfare dimension. In the digital age, narratives are weapons. The claim that the U.S. bombed Kharg Island may serve multiple purposes for different actors. For hardliners in Tehran, it could justify severe retaliation and rally domestic support. For partisan media elsewhere, it could fuel anti-American sentiment or, conversely, cheerleading for maximum pressure. For malicious actors, it could be an opportunity to sow discord, manipulate markets, or test information resilience. As consumers of information, our responsibility is to seek verification, consult credible sources, and resist the urge to share unconfirmed reports. This is not about censorship. It is about clarity. We will update this coverage as verified information emerges. Let us examine the official response, or lack thereof. As of this recording, the U.S. Department of Defense has not publicly confirmed strikes on Kharg Island. This silence could be strategic, avoiding escalation, awaiting intelligence, or preparing a diplomatic off-ramp. Iranian authorities have condemned the attack and promised retaliation. Regional allies like Saudi Arabia and the UAE have called for restraint while reaffirming their security partnerships with the United States. The United Nations has urged de-escalation. In crisis diplomacy, what is not said can be as important as what is said. The coming hours will be critical in determining whether this incident becomes a contained economic strike or a catalyst for wider conflict. What about the global implications? The Middle East is a linchpin of global energy security, trade routes, and diplomatic alliances. Any escalation that disrupts oil flows risks triggering a supply shock that could tip the global economy into recession. It could also reshape alliance structures as nations reassess their dependencies and partnerships. For China and India, major importers of Iranian oil, the stakes are economic and strategic. For Europe, already navigating energy transitions, the risk is renewed inflation and social strain. For the United States, the challenge is balancing pressure on Iran with stability in global markets. This is not a regional issue, it is a global test of crisis management. So what happens next? There are several possible scenarios. In the most contained scenario, the Kharg Island strike is a one-off demonstration of capability. Iran responds with limited symbolic retaliation, and diplomatic channels reopen to prevent further escalation. In a more escalatory scenario, Iran launches significant counterattacks. The U.S. responds in kind, and the conflict expands to include multiple fronts and actors. In a diplomatic scenario, third-party mediators, perhaps Oman, Qatar, or the UN, intervene to de-escalate, using this incident as a catalyst for renewed dialogue. The outcome depends on intelligence assessments, political calculations, and the fragile mechanisms of crisis communication. What can you do as an informed citizen? First, stay informed through credible sources. Follow official statements from governments, international organizations, and reputable news agencies. Be skeptical of viral claims that lack verification. Second, understand the broader context. This is not an isolated event. It is part of a complex, multi-layered conflict with deep historical roots and global ramifications. Third, engage constructively. Share verified information. Support humanitarian efforts for those affected by violence. Advocate for policies that prioritize diplomacy and civilian protection. At Power Clash Report, we believe that knowledge is power. Understanding geopolitical events helps us make better decisions, protect our families, and contribute to a more stable world. Before we conclude, let us recap the key points. Kharg Island is Iran's primary oil export terminal, handling up to 90% of the country's crude shipments. Reports of strikes on the facility have emerged, with Iranian authorities confirming an attack and describing it as economic terrorism. The United States has not publicly claimed responsibility but has issued stark warnings about further escalation. The strategic logic of targeting oil infrastructure is to degrade Iran's revenue and leverage, but the risks include global market shocks, severe retaliation, and wider conflict. The phrase, "total wipeout is next," is a deliberate ambiguity designed to maximize pressure, but also carries escalation risks. The human and economic stakes are substantial, affecting civilians, workers, consumers, and global stability. The path forward depends on verification, restraint, and responsible communication from all parties. The choice before the world's leaders is stark. They can allow fear and rhetoric to drive policy, risking a spiral of escalation, or they can rely on intelligence, verification, and strategic patience to manage crises without surrendering to panic. History will judge this moment not by the weapons fired, but by the wisdom with which they are answered. As citizens of an interconnected world, we have both the right and the responsibility to demand clarity over chaos, evidence over emotion, and truth over virality. If this analysis provided value, please like this video, subscribe to Power Clash Report, and share it with someone who needs to understand these developments. Turn on notifications so you do not miss our updates as this story evolves. In the description below, you will find links to official sources, energy market data, and further reading on this developing situation. We are committed to bringing you signal in a world of noise. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay safe. And remember, in a world of increasing uncertainty, clarity is the most valuable asset we have.